The rent collection is a big one for landlords. Streamlining that in a way that's easy for them and their tenants is important. And there are a lot of nuances to the rent collection process. And a lot of that has come from landlords on our platform. So for example, not just letting tenants pay rent on the platform, but tracking that in real time.
What is Agent Ignite? Are you wondering how you can make more money and create a competitive advantage for yourself and your clients in this ever competitive real estate industry? Agent Ignite is the key to furthering your knowledge, establishing your expertise, and positioning yourself as a go-to expert. They deliver new and relevant knowledge so you can expand your clientele, close more deals, and ultimately increase income. Each month features a new guest speaker who will deliver on what is most relevant for your business. As a member of DMAR's Market Trends Committee, an avid champion for building wealth through real estate, and a self-proclaimed data geek, Nicole will share market trends and commentary that will add value to you and your clients. Staying up to date on industry statistics, coupled with niche topics delivered by industry experts, will help you motivate your buyers and sellers and make you more money. Sign up for the next Agent Ignite session at theruthteam.com/events. This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Ryan Barone. And Ryan is the brain behind RentRedi. And that's RentRedi, an all-inclusive landlord-tenant app that helps landlords go mobile and manage rentals from wherever and whenever, wherever you're at. He's also the company's co-founder, CEO, CTO. Prior to RentRedi, he worked at Goldman Sachs and PricewaterhouseCoopers, and graduated from Pace University, New York City campus. Double majored in economics, mathematics, and a minor in computer science. So Ryan's a brain behind tech, and he has he saw an opportunity, and he jumped into that opportunity in a massive way to create or solve a problem, right? For so many people in our business, specifically landlords, but also it's easing burdens for tenants as well. But we get into not only the software that he's built. That's good. If you have tenants now that you're self-managing or rentals, you should consider RentRedi. No doubt about it. Or having some kind of tech like this. But Ryan's going to help you to think differently about having tech. And so he's mentioned that 80% of landlords don't use any kind of tech or app or something to help manage when they're self-managing. And that just seems, it just blows my mind, as much as tech has changed all of our lives. It's something that you definitely should consider. But you're going to learn a lot from Ryan, not only from potentially how you're self-managing and how you could do that better, but also just being an entrepreneur and starting a new business and how he raised some of the first money to start this business. But you're going to learn a lot today from Ryan. Ryan, welcome to the show. It's been interesting learning a little more about you and your background, but heavily in tech, of course. And I tell you what, tech is, it's like so much of our lives these days, right? From everything we're doing. It's just like everywhere. It's amazing when you really start to think about how tech is shaping everything we're doing and oftentimes making it better. I would say a lot of the time, making it better. And you're going to share with us one of those ways today, especially in, I think, multifamily, but in real estate, that, a piece of tech that you are, an expert in that's changing a lot for a lot of landlords and tenants as well, I think. And so looking forward to getting into that. Give us a little more about yourself and maybe your background in tech, but what caused you to get into this specific piece of tech, RentRedi, but give us a little bit about your path to that, this product as well.
Sure, absolutely. So it actually started back when I was in college. I was going to Pace University, double majored in economics and math, minored in computer science, and I had gotten my first internship right across the street from Pace at Goldman Sachs, and it made sense to go get my first apartment, move out of dorms. It was a really exciting experience at first. I found this great apartment that I loved and was hoping to rent. And long story short, I did not get the apartment, largely because the process of actually applying for that apartment was difficult for me and my roommates. And so all of the documents we had to gather, letter employment, W-2, bank statements, tax returns, student transcripts, was a lot to gather in a short period of time. And so initially I decided out of that experience that there should be a better way to apply to apartments. And so I started creating an app really for myself as a tenant to apply to apartments easier, and for my friends to apply to apartments easier, and quickly heard landlords come back saying, hey, wait a minute, our side is just as bad, if not worse. We need to make our side better too. And so it's where that was really the first moment of, customer feedback becoming a part of how we shaped the company. And it quickly shaped into both sides. And you already mentioned landlords and tenants both, and really becoming a product that is for both landlords and tenants, and really the entire life cycle. So over time, more and more landlords came to us with problems about, trying to collect rent or maintenance or communication, lease signing and listings. And so we've really grown over time, really organically with these landlords in terms of their feedback and what we've added in the product from that, to creating this property management software that makes it very easy for an independent landlord that says, I want to do it myself, but I don't want to pull all my hair out at the same time or lose all of my profit using something that basically sucks all of that out of me. So how can I do it myself, but still sleep at night? And that's really what we've been able to become for them and their tenants.
Interesting story that you were attempting to be a renter, right? And had problem through the application process. Not many people at that point, especially, renters will say, hey, I'm just going to go create my own app or a piece of software that's going to help me do that. And then you receive some feedback that helped you to see an opportunity, sounds like, to push forward and make something, right? So let's move into that a little bit. Like, what is RentRedi, and like what does that do for tenants or landlords? Let's dive into that a little bit, and I want to hear too, and we'll get to about just your experience as far as becoming an entrepreneur and some advice, some things you've learned.
Absolutely. So in terms of what RentRedi is today, it's a truly end-to-end suite for independent landlords that own some properties that they want to manage themselves, to handle everything from listing the unit out when it's vacant, to collecting and finding tenants, getting full screenings completed, running all of their payments through the platform, handling any maintenance issues that may arise over time, signing leases with tenants and communicating with them throughout those leases, and then ultimately either re-signing the tenant or restarting the process. And we've even along the way been able to build in a number of things that not just for landlords benefiting them, but also benefiting for their tenants, or becoming ways that will make tenants want to live there more. Things like, by paying your rent on time, we can allow tenants to report that rent to credit bureaus and build or boost their credit score just by paying the rent when they're supposed to. And ultimately, a landlord on the other end happy they receive their rent on time more often.
Tell me, who's your ideal client? It's on the landlord side. Like, is there a size of property? Is there, how do you look at that? Who's your ideal client?
So our ideal client tends to be, I would say, about 1 to 100 units is our bread and butter. We have people as small as one single family home that they manage on the platform. Up to about 100 is where we've designed it for. We certainly have some that break that mold and say, I don't care. It's good experience for me managing, good experience for my tenants, and they go into the couple hundreds or 1,000 above. But really where our bread and butter is that 1 to 100. And really a big part of it stems from what's been readily accessible for those landlords in the past. A lot of them are individuals that got into real estate investing to either put a kid through college or retire early or go on a few extra vacations. And largely, if they weren't very, very large property management organizations, they were kind of told to use pen and paper and spreadsheets. They weren't really given some sort of software that would make it easy for them or their tenants, which I happen to be one of, in the early days. And so really it's designed for that group of landlords that's historically been underrepresented, honestly.
Tell us a little bit about how, as a landlord, it helps just streamline things. I know you mentioned a bunch of things earlier, but break a few of those down that maybe are the biggest pain points, for landlords.
Sure thing. The rent collection is a big one for landlords. Streamlining that in a way that's easy for them and their tenants is important. And there are a lot of nuances to the rent collection process. And a lot of that has come from landlords on our platform. So for example, not just letting tenants pay rent on the platform, but tracking that in real time. One of the earliest pieces of feedback we got was the check is in the mail excuse. Can you eliminate that for me? And so we have basically real-time dashboards on the landlord and tenant side, and even between roommates, so that everybody in real time, the second a payment is initiated, can see that update. But even on top of that, have built things that automate the really manual tasks for landlords and for tenants, where as a landlord, they can set up auto late fees and they can structure that differently by unit. So if they go acquire a new property and that's grandfathered into a different auto late fee structure than their other units, they can have those set up separately. And all of that runs automatically. So if a tenant's 5 days late and they need $50 the first day, $10 every day after that, and hey, I'm in Massachusetts where there's a 5% cap on my late fee, I needed to cap at that 5%. All of that can be entered by them and streamlined so that they're not doing anything month to month in terms of managing that. And vice versa on the tenant side, they can set up their auto pay. They have a roommate do it as partial so that they can split their rent automatically and have that paid, and ultimately deposit into a landlord's bank account that's appropriate. I know a lot of investors will create different LLCs by property to separate that liability, and that will come with a different bank account. So we automatically route to those separate accounts based on where they are, or even in certain states where you're now required to hold security deposits in a different place than rent deposits, those can go to separate places as well so that you're not thinking about or managing that. It's just streamlined for you once you have it configured the way you want it.
No doubt. I mean, like having tech around landlording is just like, it just seems like such a necessity to me. I mean, like having to do all that stuff manually. I mean, why? I just want to why would you do that to yourself? Right? Why would you do that? But I wanted to ask you, because one thing you even mentioned before we started recording, which I thought could be very beneficial in our business too, in any business, but is using customer feedback. And I would love to hear how you've done that, and maybe even a couple examples of how it's helped you all improve in a big way.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the topic of the rent side, one that comes to mind is a landlord on the platform that was in Texas. And at the time there, if a tenant pays even $1, it resets an eviction clock. And they said, hey, I'm going through, unfortunately, an eviction proceeding where I either need this person to pay me in full or not pay me a single dollar and extend that time period. Can you give me a way of blocking partial payments or full payments if I want to get a certified bank check on a tenant by tenant basis? I don't want to disrupt any of my other tenants, but I do also want to make sure I either get my rent or get a new tenant here. And so we were able to build in basically overnight the ability for landlords to block partial or full payments on a tenant by tenant basis so that they have control over who's paying in, and came directly from landlords on the platform telling us, what they needed, how it would solve their problem.
Tell us, is there a way that you are proactive about collecting feedback?
So one of the things that we have is actually live chat on both the landlord and tenant side. And the funny thing is a lot of companies will look at live chat as a way to just support someone's question in terms of they have a problem, solve the problem, and they go away. The way that we approach it is fundamentally different than that. Although, yes, we do want to answer the problem that you're having and resolve that if you are messaging in with any questions. We also take the approach and the time, since we have you there in live chat, to ask how we can ultimately eliminate that in the future. And so the idea is that if Whitney of yesterday comes in and asks a certain question and we answer that question, we're not just answering that question, but we're also addressing how do we make it that tomorrow's Whitney never even thinks about that. It's just intuitive for you. And you come in and say, oh, wow, they've really thought about everything. But ultimately, we didn't really think of everything. It was our own customers telling us if it was like this, or if you added this particular feature or this improvement here, it would make things better for me and better for other people. And then we add that, and the next person that comes in feels like it's just there by chance.
Yeah, that you all are just on top of it, right? In a way that you are, right? You are being proactive about how you use that information, right? People have questions. You want to ensure nobody else has that question or that issue or whatever. And I think in our business, I try to just push our team in that same thought process all the time, right? Especially the few of us who are forward facing, with our investors, right? If an investor has a question or an issue, it's like such great feedback, right? Like, I hate that maybe there's an issue, but we didn't see that. And hey, we want to change that, right? Moving forward. So nobody else has that issue. And that is just, it's just great business, right? It's just smart business, right. I think, to have that mindset. And tell us maybe too about how, I think it's interesting, like the live chat, you talked about having the live chat. That's a way that you collect that information. Are there any ways that you're even reaching out saying, hey, how's this going? Any suggestions, anything like that? And what tech do you use for that?
So we do a little bit of a mix. We've used Qualtrics for that. We've used Intercom for it, for reaching out. There's some fun features where if it's just a quick yes or no, would this matter to you? Is this important? We can do this somewhat more in the bottom of your screen, in-app prompt asking you if something would be helpful. If it's more of a survey we want to collect data on, we can do that. But also we're constantly calling landlords. We actually do call our own landlords just to ask, how's it going? How are you? Is there anything I can answer questions for? So we have a whole inside team that only reaches out to actual people that are already subscribed to the platform, but just asking if there's anything we can do to help them. And so a lot of that does drive what ultimately becomes part of the product tomorrow. That's
awesome. Let's talk a little bit about you starting this business. It sounds like you started this, probably at a fairly young age compared to most, right? But you saw an opportunity, you moved forward into entrepreneurship. Shed some light on that, and maybe some advice, or looking back, anything you would have done differently. But give us some of that roadmap there to making this happen.
I think a big one for me was just starting. I think in the very beginning, there was a lot of planning around, did I have the perfect product that had every possible bell and whistle you could imagine, that solved every problem anybody could possibly come to me with? And I think it very much applies to anything you're doing, whether it's real estate investing or starting a business. You want it to be perfect, whatever you are creating. And you're going to pour, your heart and soul into this. But at the same time, one of the nice things is, you have to make some assumptions, some guesses when you're starting out in anything. But ultimately, once you do just start and put something out there, you start getting what we were talking about, which is that feedback side of things where people start to tell you what you should do. And that then makes it much easier to provide whatever service or product you're trying to provide in a more helpful way, because it came from the source of the person that's going to consume it. And so really just getting something out there into people's hands was a big one for me, and not getting stuck in, the cycle of analysis paralysis, and just making sure that I'm executing, listening, improving, and repeating that cycle.
Done is better than perfect.
For sure.
Right? If you had waited till you had it perfect, you'd have never launched.
Right.
Right. I just love that advice. And what would you do differently? Anything else that, hey, as an entrepreneur, as you're growing this business now, if you could look back and say, okay, I wish I had known this thing, however many years ago.
I think one thing I learned along the way that wasn't apparently obvious in the beginning was partnering with the right people, whether that was my co-founder, my team, integration partners, our own investors in our company. In the very early days, I think it feels like you have to do everything and know everything. And one of the amazing things as you go along is you realize you can't do everything and you don't know everything. And there are other people there that know things you don't, that are really good at things you're not really good at. And it makes it really fun because ultimately they make the entire company better. It's fun to interact with them. They do phenomenal things that you look at and say, oh, wow, I wouldn't have done that well if it were just me. And so I consider myself quite blessed in terms of having what I feel like is a phenomenal team and investors and integration partners and a co-founder in this, but is one of those things that I think initially starting, at least I did, and I'm sure probably other people have, that like gut feeling that you have to just know and do everything, and really you don't. You can partner in so many ways with so many other people that ultimately make it easier for everyone involved and more fun.
Yeah, that's just great advice. Speak to the fundraising portion of starting this business and how you did that, and because I think that's connected to the partnership stuff as well, right? Or finding good investors. How did you do that for this startup?
That was an interesting one. So I had no prior ties to the venture capital world prior to starting RentRedi or anything like that. Really, our first investors were landlords on our platform, actually. So I was personally going to meetups in the very early days, talking to investors about what I had, what did they think of it, any feedback they'd have. And eventually some of them said, well, are you raising money to build this bigger and better? And so I, of course, said yes to that. And our very first investors were landlords on the platform and are still today. But in terms of on the venture side, our first venture round actually came from Tech Day New York, which was an event that we went to, my co-founder and myself, and we presented there. We met someone there, Eric Guardiola, who came to our booth after we presented on the stage and said, hey, I think this is great. My firm doesn't really invest in this stage of funding, or much later stage, but I'd love to keep in touch. And we basically said, if there's anyone you know that does invest in this stage, we'd love to talk to them. He ended up introducing us to TIA Ventures, who became our first institutional investor in the round. And the rest is history. Wow.
Yeah, it's incredible. You never know where one connection is going to lead to another, right?
You really don't.
Wow, but you all presented. You were presenting on a stage, and he loved what you were doing. You made connections that led to other things. That's incredible. But you're putting yourself out there too.
Yeah.
What about a way that you are working to improve your business, just as a whole, that we could apply to our business?
Yeah, I think the customer feedback one is a big one. And I think doing it in a structured way as well is big as well. So, one way that we break it down is the quantity of customers that it would impact, whoever those may be, and then also the severity of which it impacts them. I think that when people talk to you, they will share the difference between this would be nice to have if you had it, but it's just an idea, or I absolutely need this. This is, disrupting my life in some respect. And then there's everything in the middle on that spectrum. So in terms of quantifying the issue and then identifying how severe the issue is, like in a landlord's perspective, one of the things we added to the platform was video maintenance requests. And it was for actually diagnosing how severe the issue was. A landlord saying, water is not water. If you have a leaking sink, that can be something that's destroying my kitchen floor and I need to get out of bed at 2 a.m. and go help preserve my property. Or it could be a little drip into the sink that you can put a bowl under and it'll be totally fine for a day or two. And so that was one way that landlords were looking at addressing the severity of the issue or identifying the severity of the issue. I think the same applies to any business, for any entrepreneur, ourselves included, in terms of understanding how can we release things that are most impactful, most helpful for people, and help the widest range of audience. Our goal is to help as many landlords as possible. In our particular case, we have almost 20 million landlords in our segment that we're trying to address. So trying to help as many of them as possible is a focus for us, as well as the importance of what we're addressing for them.
The video of the maintenance issue, man, that would save so much time alone. That one feature, right? You're not having to get out of bed in the middle of the night, but just being able to say, hey, let's put a bowl under that and I'll be there in the morning, right? That's incredible, because it could be a massive issue. But things like that tech and even cell phones, have allowed for, it's just incredible. Ryan, what are some daily habits that you are disciplined about that have helped you achieve this level of success?
It's a good question. For me, I don't know that I have a set routine, to be honest. For me, I feel like we've talked about it a lot, but it goes back to the point of, what's important for the business and what's important for customers of the team. So for my own success, it does a lot go back to what's the problem that anyone is dealing with? How can I help with that issue? Is it something that I directly have to solve? Or is it something that I can work with someone and help them along the way in solving that, and ultimately put them in a position to be able to solve that on their own in the future? And I think that helps us scale, whether it's an individual customer that we're working with or someone on the team. But I think in all of that respect, it just goes back to whatever issues that we're trying to solve for people that they're dealing with in some respect. And then how do we fix that for them?
Awesome. I thought of one other question I wanted to ask you, though, because I think you had mentioned in some stuff I read about you, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think you had mentioned like 80% of landlords in the country don't use any kind of software. Is that right?
Right.
And yeah, why is that?
I think it's a combination of things. One, in the past, the softwares that were released, in a lot of cases, were targeted towards much larger property management organizations than these independent landlords that were managing on their own. There are still services out there that if you're under 50 units, they won't even pick up the phone and speak to you. So for a lot of landlords, they're just priced out of that. And then there is the pricing factor of it in general, in terms of a lot of these landlords are struggling between often choices of, do I hire a property manager for 8 to 10%, or do I handle it on pen and paper and spreadsheets where I keep all of the profit, but I have to spend a ton more time? Where we've really tried hard to position ourselves is allow landlords to keep as much of the profit as possible. We don't even increase their costs for the platform as they add more units. They can have as many units as they want, but at the same time, streamline as much of that while still giving them control. And I think streamlining with control is something that we found has been important for our landlords as well. There is a difference that we found in terms of the mentality of what you want, of just saying, you handle it and I don't want to see it, versus I want to understand and control and have the ultimate decision over everything that's happening with my investments. I just don't want to have to do the very manual tasks that if I could just explain it to even a human and they would do that for me, that would be ideal. And so it's for us trying to build a product that gets as close to you being able to say, hey, Ryan, I want you to do this when someone's late, or when there's a maintenance issue, or when we have to sign a new lease or vet a tenant. And that's just RentRedi doing it, but ultimately feels as close as possible to just explaining to someone what you want them to do and them doing exactly what you want.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just the mindset behind all that. I mean, I think we could apply to any of our businesses and are going to improve, right? And so, Ryan, how do you like to give back?
I mean, for me, I like to look at it as, I do some donation type things. I actually did a half marathon a little while back that was with a friend of mine who's in active military. And so we chose a fund that was for building homes for injured veterans. So it's a little bit of a combination of both the real estate side
That's awesome.
And the military side of things. But also, in terms of just day to day, it comes down to what I feel like I dedicate my life to, which is the RentRedi side of things. Trying to make something that ultimately, for everybody involved, makes them happier, like where you live or what you're renting, in terms of how you're building an easier life for yourself, a more financially free life for yourself. Both sides of that are incredibly important things. So for me, it's just about what can I do to try to make that easier for everyone, that hopefully 5 years from now, everyone looking back says, we can't believe anybody ever stressed about any of those things. It's so simple, but it takes a lot of work to get to that place. And that's really the focus for me.
Ryan, it's been a pleasure to meet you and have you on the show and really hear about RentRedi and your path to building that business, right? And building the software. But I love your focus on feedback. And I just think it's a great lesson for any of us, especially in our business too, where we're dealing with investors. They're the lifeblood of our business, and it's like always our goal. And I'm stressing to our team, like, hey, if there's an issue with investors, that's why we're doing all this, right? Is to build those relationships and take the best care of them we possibly can. I think in your case, it's landlords, right? And tenants, but easing all those processes and headaches that any landlord has to deal with at one time or another. And it's interesting that 80% of landlords don't use tech or an app or something like that. So sounds like a lot of room there for RentRedi to grow. But grateful to have you on and really to encourage the listeners that, hey, you can make your life so much easier by using some tech like this, in your business. And tell them how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
So rentredi.com is how they can find us. It's RentRedi because we're a startup. We have to spell something wrong, but they can contact us there. We have live chat, like I mentioned. We also have phone numbers there. We love to talk to landlords and tenants both. It's just fun for us. It's how we build everything we do. So if you want to just drop by and say hello, or if you want to check it out, definitely do. It would be fun to chat with anyone.
Thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. Please subscribe and share it with your friends. We want to help you become the passive investor you've always wanted to become, but also the operator you've always wanted to become. We want to be the number one resource for your real estate investing journey. But go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can start investing in real estate today.